Now, if you've clicked on this video, you've probably partaken in a drinking game, or at least would like to, and drinking games are often trivial, nonsensical bits of fun with your mates. However, in today's video, I am going to look a little bit deeper and see if there's any more to it underneath the surface. Is it just a bit of a doss with your mates? Is it a chance for you to just lay back and escape from the complications you've got in your life? Is it a time to switch off, or is it a time to switch on? See, I think drinking games with old mates or new acquaintances can reveal a lot about someone's personality. See, all you've got to do is observe, right? Which admittedly can be rather difficult when you've, consumed so much alcohol you're barely aware of yourself. However, next time you participate in a drinking game, just look for these little signs that I'm about to go through with you, because even if you're meeting someone for the first time, you can actually infer a lot about someone's personality. I think playing games is a much better way of getting to know a person than just by having a conversation, right? Think about it. When people have conversations, they quite often put up barriers and are quite conscious of how they're coming across. But when they're playing a game, by design, they often get swept away with the game and they end up viewing winning the game as more important than the social interaction that they're having. And therefore, they end up revealing more about themselves. Actions also speak louder than words, and people's characteristics are often put to the test in semi-real situations. Let's start with something simple. Do they play fairly? And I know this might sound trivial and daft because, it's in the context of a silly drinking game, but actually it isn't. A player's behaviour in a low-stakes game environment, I think, will often predict their behaviour in wider life where the stakes are higher. Like, if a player tries to cheat the system in a silly drinking game, and this is not for like a humorous thing, I'll get onto that, I think you can bet money that that player is completely okay with lying or playing underhanded games in their real personal life. And I think that's someone that you might want to stay away from. I must stress that some players will just blatantly try to cheat so they can get caught as a bit of banter, as a bit of tomfoolery, which does tell you more about them, but it usually just tells you they're actually quite funny and can take a bit of banter and can mess about, which is fun. So that's a different thing. That is, as long as they don't repeat it too many times in order to get attention. That's a different thing. People play games like they play real life. Their strategies and their principles will often mirror what works for them in real life, because I think instinctually, when playing games, people just will fall back into their habits and what feels comfortable to them. And that's especially true when they've had a drink. If a player values the integrity and the rules of a game and everyone's enjoyment of the game above getting a trivial advantage for themselves to win, then I think that's a big green flag that that person has at least some integrity and empathy. Whereas if a player will do anything to just try and get ahead without people noticing, to cheat in a game of such little importance, you can bet your house, if you have one, that that behaviour manifests itself somewhere else in their life. I'm not necessarily saying that they cheat on their partners or something, though don't count it out. And also, some people don't mean to cheat, like, for example, not necessarily taking the required amount of sips in a drinking game isn't always cheating. Some people just don't understand quantities, and some people just can't take the drink. You can also use drinking games as a way to observe if someone's insecure or not. As part of a drinking game, people are often dared to do daft stuff as long as it's not too far, or involved in embarrassing situations. It's just part of the fun. And with the alcohol flowing, it's very natural for people just to poke fun at each other, often just to test if that person can take a little bit of stick. Like, it's very interesting to observe how someone you don't know takes a verbal dig. I think it tells a lot about a person. As long as the verbal dig doesn't cross the line and is actually funny, then someone with a good sense of security and a good sense of humour is just going to take that on the chin and laugh it off completely fine. But if that person is bothered by the comment, especially if they've already made similar level of verbal digs, that's a big warning sign. That, and I've seen that in people, and that's been a first little red flag that I've seen in someone, and it's turned out that that person was a pretty horrible human being. If I was meeting a new group of people, say I was at uni freshers week again, and we were playing a drinking game and someone took a just trivial jokey comment personally like that, I would immediately be wary of that person. I wouldn't, be that quick to just write them off, but I would definitely observe them more. And on the flip side, if someone could just laugh that off and have a bit of banter, I'd say that's a very big green flag, and I'd say, yeah, that person's quite secure, might be fun to hang around with. Especially if they're just willing to make a fool of themselves, within reason, and entertain the group. Like, that's someone who can just be so much fun to be around and be the life of the party. It's also a sign of someone who's secure. Something else I find interesting, right, is how people react to losing. Like, don't get me wrong, competitiveness can be good fun if it's all in good spirits, like if it's just for a laugh. Like, it's a fun running gag to like pretend to be overly invested in such a trivial, non-consequential drinking game. Like, that could be a fun little gag, as long as at the end of the game everyone is just fine. Like, everyone just, you don't even have to shake hands, but you know what I mean. It's that spirit of going, oh, fair play, you won, and then not bothering about it afterwards, because it's a game. Anyone who tries to contest the result of a pre-drinks drinking game and is actually upset about the result is a melt. I'm sorry, like, they probably have an issue in wider life with not getting what they want, and they'll probably be a very good businessman, but not a good friend. And you know what? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about this, because there's probably a bunch of stuff that I'm missing. But if you find this useful or in any way entertaining, I'd love it if you did subscribe or just gave this video a like. It would mean a lot as a small channel for me, so that'd be appreciated. But even past winning and losing and cheating, there's a lot to be inferred about how someone plays a game. Like, are they very pedantic on the rules being absolutely followed to the letter, or do they get a bit jittery when the conversation just kind of drifts from the game and people are just talking and no one picks up a card for a while? Do they get a bit like, oh, it's your turn, Jimmy? You know what I mean? We all know someone who's obsessed with reminding people that it's their turn. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just might mean that that person prefers to live their life in a bit more of a regimented way. Whereas those people who lose interest in the game or just don't seem to get it because they don't listen might be a bit more laid back, and free-spirited, but might struggle to focus on prolonged tasks that they don't really feel like doing. On both sides, I think it's more interesting to see how people compromise. Does the person who, really wants to get on with the game, do they allow the conversation to flow a bit more because they realise that people are just drifting away from the game for a little bit? Or do they try and control the room? Do the ones who are easily distracted and maybe disinterested in the game, do they kind of put that aside and just get on with the game because they can see everyone else wants to? Or do they find their own conversation much more important? Can they read the room? I'm telling you, bringing people together to play a game, I think, is as good a way of testing their social intelligence as an IQ test is at testing someone's academic intelligence. If you just watch as a fly on the wall, you can just see the patterns of people's behaviour, and you can see who makes the room a more fun place to be and who does the opposite. Speaking of which, watch out for people who try and make everything about them. Now, I will caveat this by saying, when you're getting drunk, you lose a lot of self-awareness, so that there's a line between going, well, that person's quite tipsy, so it's interesting to get a read on them with their social barriers lowered, as opposed to the next line you cross, which is that person can barely string a sentence together and they will be embarrassed by their behaviour tomorrow morning. Like, it's quite harsh to judge someone too heavily when they're in that state. A common symptom of drunkenness is that people become much louder and more talkative, so this is something to judge probably earlier in the night. Nevertheless, though, some people just do have a tendency to just dominate the group conversation and make it harder for other people to talk. This can be out of anxiety, so again, insecurity, or it can just be a genuine lack of self-awareness or a disinterest in other people, and that then obviously fades into narcissism. Now, for me, a mark of a good socializer is someone who's able to bring less confident people into the conversation. I think someone who is able to make other people feel confident and comfortable in social environments. It's just a very big green flag, innit? Meeting new people and even just getting to know people a bit better in group social environments can be daunting, it can be difficult, and it can be very easy to just focus on yourself and how you're coming across. But in doing that, you can often fail to observe other people and their little subtleties that are going to tell you a lot about them. It can be quite hard to choose who your friends are, and yet it's one of the most important decisions you're going to make in your life, so it's important we just try and choose wisely. Now, just because someone behaves a certain way one night and doesn't make a good impression on you, doesn't necessarily mean that person's a bad person. It just doesn't. And vice versa. Like, if someone does make a good impression on you, definitely doesn't necessarily mean they're a good person. Granted. But when you focus on other people instead of yourself, you do two things. Firstly, you hold people to a standard, and you will probably gradually, if you keep doing this, heighten your standards for people that you allow into your life, which is only a good thing. And secondly, when you're focused on other people, you stop worrying about yourself. You'll stop worrying about how you come across to other people, and that's such a great way to just limit your anxiety in these group settings, and it'll mean that you come across as more relaxed and more fun to be with, and you'll just be more of your normal, proper self, and that will mean that the right people, hopefully, gravitate towards you, which is what you want.